So let's go through the key players in the field. Of course, we have our picks. We obviously have to start at the top with the two top favorites here. No surprise that Hideki's the favorite. Again, he has to do something that been done since Justin Thomas, but I don't think that's a big deal. It's been about 7 years, so maybe it's time. But yeah, what do you think about Matsuyama? I guess the only thing here is that we are dealing once again with a low number. It's not Scotty Scheffler, but it is 9-1. And so it's a low number. Matsuyama was 22-1 last week. Now it's 9-1. And this is also something that I think is important when you're thinking about, well, let's say you're somebody who took Matsuyama like yourself last week. For me, this is just the way I do things. For me, if I win on a player, especially in golf, I win on a player and he's playing the next event or whatever the case may be, and I see that there's some reason where you might like his chances that week, I'm going to put some money on him because I'm not going to feel foolish to have him go out and win again and me not put money on him after he just made money for me the week before or the event before. That's just the way I've learned it. I learned it years ago, not doing it and going, well, that was dumb. And then ever since then, so again, it might just be a little bit of money, maybe to get my money back if I don't really want to put money on him because he is 9-1. But give me some particular reasons why, besides the 9-1 number, why staying away from Matsuyama might be a good idea.
The price was probably just too short for me, Greg. And I mean, obviously, you're not going to get a whole lot of value in a guy. And some people might argue that 9-1 is value and that he should be priced lower than that. Hideki won here just 3 years ago in 2022. But I am typically of the belief that once a guy wins, there's a little bit of a letdown. Now, it can be different in golf. You can also really ride a wave of momentum. Sure. It wasn't that long ago. I think it was Lucas Glover won a couple times in a row at the end of the season. And, I don't think letdown is the right word, but we know how hard it is. And it's fairly uncommon to win in back-to-back weeks. So, there and to each his own, there's all kinds of ways to skin a cat. You like to bet on the guy that just won. I tend to not to. I mean, absolutely, we can both be right. And that's why they play the games. We don't know what's going to happen, obviously. But, and I also think, obviously, Hideki Matsuyama is one of the very best players in the world, but it feels like it's the elite of the elite, Scotty Scheffler, Tiger Woods, those type of guys where I might say, you know what, I think he's going to win again and he's going to win again and again, whatever. But most guys week in and week out on the tour, I'm not betting them in consecutive weeks. If they won one week, I'm typically staying away in the follow-up.
Especially at a low number. And by the way, what I was saying is that even if I don't put him in my picks, I'll have a little bit of money on the side just to make sure that if he wins, that I get my money back. But I completely understand what you're saying because here's an example. I looked at this. Hideki Matsuyama has not had back-to-back top fives on the PGA Tour since week 31 and 32 of the 2021 season.
That's amazing. I never would have guessed that, but that's really because he's gotten on some runs where he's been red hot. But, and Scotty Scheffler is a guy that how many times did he finish top 10 in the last couple of years?
Amazing.
Every week.
Yes.
So, you just got to pick your spots. Every week is a new snowflake, right? A unique handicap. I mean, the skill sets, a lot of stuff stays the same, but every week is different. So, who knows? Next week, I might land on the guy that won this week. You just have to feel what is right. The market, all the things that go into your handicap, it just has to make sense where you ultimately land.
Okay. Now, these guys here, these three, I kind of stayed away from primarily. I think they're all good contenders, but Henley and Connors definitely, because I don't like the numbers are too low for me for those players. Russell, let's keep in mind, Russell Henley, even though he's miraculously the 17th best player world ranking in the world, which is just amazing, he's had one win since 2017. So, I mean, see how hard it is. And Henley is just the reason he's 17th in the world is because he's a machine when it comes to top 30s and things of that nature, which is what puts him in the world rank. But he doesn't win a lot. So trying to pick the spot where Russell Henley wins is not that easy. And I can't do it at 20-1. But both of these guys, I mean, Connors has a great track history at this golf course, including 4 top 15s and a top 5. He's also trending in the right direction. With a 22nd, a 7th, a 6th, and a 5th in his last 4, the 5th last week. But keep in mind, Corey Connors has 2 wins. It's both at the Texas Open. So he's never won outside the Texas Open, and he's 14-1. And Tom Kim, he's coming off a runner-up at Hero, a runner-up at Korea, but in between, he missed the cut in Asia. He missed the cut here in 2023 in his only appearance. But Tom Kim has also just been a little bit kind of, as you can tell just by those last 3 events, inconsistent. And by the way, he lost that event, the runner-up one in Korea, in a playoff to Benny An, who we'll talk about in just a minute. So anyway, just getting through those 3 guys, which again, I think there's good reasons to take all of them, but I just the numbers are too low for me at this point. What about you?
Yeah, Connors certainly made some sense to me this week. And I think, the number's a little low, but he played very well last week, had a bad stretch of about 9 holes on Saturday, but otherwise he played very, very well at Kapalua. Tom Kim, I noticed, in beginning my handicap this week that he's become very popular. He's a popular pick for a lot of people that I've seen already. And absolutely, he makes a bunch of sense. You mentioned how well he's done in a few events recently. He's a tremendous player. He makes sense for this golf course. I just felt like I gotta dig deeper and find something else that everybody isn't already landing on. And then you talk about Russell Henley. I mean, he's won here. He's won at Mayakoba. I mean, he absolutely fits the profile.
Yep.
But you're right. And he played well last week at Kapalua too. And I've been on Russell Henley a handful of times, and gosh, has he broken my heart on the back 9 on Sunday a number of times. I did land correctly on him one time in 2022 when he won at Mayakoba. But I've had a lot of near misses with him as well. And it's kind of what you're saying. He doesn't always get all the way to the finish line.
Yep.
So I tried to go a little bit deeper in the weeds, come up with some guys that are really playing well, make a bunch of sense, price is right, all that good stuff. And one of the guys on the board that I did land on, we spoke about a little earlier, is Maverick McNeely. This guy's red hot as of late. He just won the RSM Classic in Sea Island, St. Simon's Island, Georgia. That's one of our correlated courses this week. It's a shorter, positional, accuracy-based coastal track with the wind. I mean, it's almost the exact same type of venue. And McNeely just won there. And oh, by the way, he's been red hot, in other events since that as well. He's had a couple of top 20s, I believe a 6th place finish, all leading up to that victory. He's played well at Harbor Town. He's played well at Colonial. He's played well at all of our core. He's played well at Mayakoba, again, when they had the worldwide technology back there. So not only do I love his current form, but I love his, the way he has played on the courses that are related to this track. He's done well here before. We know he's one of the best putters in the world, but he also does extremely well on the par 4s of 450 to 500 yards. And over the last 24 rounds, he is 16th in this field for greens in regulation gain. So the guy's really playing well and seems to also be a good fit for this golf course. So he was the one shorter shot I did land on.
Yeah, it's really nice to see him, his game finally, where we knew he was capable of, and he had the injury and he had rehab and all that. And so he's now dialed in. It's great to see. And and look, the number is still fine. It's 25. So, I think, I think that's fine. Matter of fact, so much so that my top pick is, again, as you posted on the board, is Benny On. As I mentioned last week, I had him last year. Didn't come through for me. He kind of choked it up there in the playoff hole. But I'm going to go back to him again. And why not? He has 8 straight top 35s, including the playoff win over Tom Kim in Korea. And that was on the DP Tour in October. And I also was thinking about McNeely too. And keep in mind, McNeely, again, as you mentioned, the win. So the win has come within those last 3 events he's played.
Right. Yeah.
So that's interesting. And Benny On has the same thing going for him because he just won a couple of events ago. So yeah, so I kind of like both McNeely and On. And I know you would think that this course wouldn't make sense for Benny On because he was a heavy hitter and all that, but he's played here twice and he's been solid both appearances.
Yep, no doubt about it. And you're right. You just typically think of Ben On, and he's a bomber. You know, he ranked 2nd in the field last week at Kapalua as far as driving distance. And we've said this week we're focused more on accuracy and less on distance. But hey, the proof's in the pudding. He was a runner-up here last year. So no, I can't argue with that. I had high hopes for him last week. I figured he would show up at Kapalua, and he kind of never really got out of second gear. He wasn't awful, but he wasn't great either. No. I want to say he finished somewhere middle of the pack.
32nd.
32nd. I was going to say 20th or 30th, somewhere in that neighborhood. Just could never really find the gas pedal and start knocking birdies together, which he obviously had to do last week. And he did the year before, but no, I wouldn't be surprised if, and we go back to the trend that guys that have played the week before typically have success here at the Sony, and he qualifies for that, obviously. So it wouldn't surprise me if he did well, not at all.
Okay. By the way, Keegan Bradley was one of the other players like On who lost in the playoff last year to Grayson Murray. And I can't even believe, again, I'm going to keep saying I can't even believe, but Keegan Bradley has made himself all the way up to 12th in the world already. But that's because he won the BMW Championship late last year. He also had a 5th at the Hero, 15th last week. And he won that event, the BMW, 4 events ago. So if Bradley wins this year, it will open that trend to 4, not 3. But we'll keep an eye on that, of course. McIntyre was someone I was considering. And of course, you see in there, you've got Thigala also right around the same range. But, McIntyre has also been playing real steady. 9 straight top 25s worldwide. That does not include the WD he had at the BMW Championship last year. And in those top 25s, he has 4 top 10s and 1 top 5. He played here last year, was 52nd. And the thing with McIntyre, by the way, is he has to get, I guess, more consistent and better overall, which I'm sure he will in the U.S. But I'm sure that's going to probably happen as soon as this season.
Yeah, no, I like Bobby Mack, and he was a guy I looked at this week as well. He played pretty well last week at Kapalua. Obviously a winner in Canada last season. So, I think when you're picking guys to win outright, every now and then you're going to go with a guy that is trying to capture his first win. But there's a lot to be said about guys that have been there, done that before, knowing how to get to the finish line, knowing how to cross the finish line, and knowing how to win a golf tournament. I think there's a lot to be said about that. And Bobby Mack now has that. He's done it a couple times as of late. And off of the good play last week at the Century, he was somebody I certainly looked at. You mentioned another one there. I'm trying to remember who it was. If you go scroll up there, Keegan Bradley. Keegan Bradley's another guy that I took a hard look at this week. I mean, this guy's been playing great, and not only the current form, you go back to the win back in August at the BMW, but has played well since then. Played well again last week at Kapalua. Lost in a playoff here last year. I mean, this guy checks a lot of boxes. I had to take a hard look at him. And I think also, Greg, there's something about Bradley. He knows, obviously, that he is the Ryder Cup captain, and he's going to be captaining that team about 9 months from now. I think that's going to fuel his fire all season long. I think he's a guy, we'll be talking, doing a kind of a year-long preview show here coming up in a few weeks. He might be a guy to take a look at head-to-head matchups, finish positions, what have you, because I think he's kind of running with some adrenaline this season.
Okay, and then we see these the next list of players. Luke Clanton, nice young player, but not at 30-1. I just, sometimes these odds, I know why they do it, and the odds dropped actually, so people are putting money on them. But when players have never won before, and their odds are so low, it just boggles my mind why people do that. It's just so hard to win on the PGA Tour. And I just can't take a young player at 30-1 in a field that's this deep. And, a bunch of contenders can win. But look, he's playing really well. Second at the RSM, similar course that you've talked about. 4 top 10s in 8 PGA Tour events last year with 3 top 5s and 2 runner-ups. I mean, he got just a great start. And he could be an excellent player, probably will be. But I'm just not going to bet someone at 30-1. That's that young and who hasn't won before. But hey, Nick Dunlap did it twice last year. Davis Thompson, not on top of his game. I just mentioned him because actually he's somebody that I bet him for my one and dones last year. And then the next week he won. So, but I picked him the next week and made money off of him. But it's one of those one and done deals that just drive you crazy. But Davis Thompson, I think he's going to have a really good career, but he's struggling a little bit right now. But the other 2 players here, Pendrith and Eckroat, I did not take Eckroat, but I was seriously considering it. The kid is really talented, but I definitely, if it was one player on your list that I would have taken, it's Pendrith. It is amazing how dialed in Pendrith is right now. If you look at it, his putter's hot, which is really, that's the thing that's just given him all of this positive momentum going into this event. You got the power game and the putting. I mean, that's a scary composition right there. Keep in mind, he won the Byron Nelson, which is a pretty, long golf course. But yet, even though that's the case, he was 10th here last year, which shows you that, again, if you're a good player and you're hot, you can win anywhere. He's got 8 straight top 25s, 4 top 10s, 2 top 5s, 13th last week. And I agree. I think Pendrith's a great choice at 35-1.
Yeah, he was a guy that jumped out at me. Again, fits the bill of having played the week prior, did very, very well last week at Kapalua. I think he finished 13th. I'll talk about Luke Clanton real quick. Fantastic player. And I'd actually be surprised if he didn't contend this week. He jumps off the page as far as the stats. When you look at all the categories that I think are important this week, he is one of the top guys on my stat list. But I'm with you. I don't know if he's quite ready yet. We don't see a lot of first timers win here. The experience matters at this golf course. So I'm not quite ready to go with Luke Clanton just yet, but I'd actually be surprised if he didn't play well once again. And maybe a bet him top 20 finish is probably a real good play. And he might even do one better and go top 10. But Pendrith, I really like. And I really took notice of this guy. I picked him last year at Torrey Pines for the Farmers Insurance Open, and he had a very good week. And then he put it all together and won at the Byron Nelson, as you mentioned. And I think that, like I alluded to just a moment ago, I think getting that first win, it does so much for these guys. We know that a massive part of being successful on the PGA Tour and anything really is confidence. Okay. And when you get that win, you're like, okay, I know that I can play with these guys now. I can win out here. I can do this. And we've kind of seen that manifest with Taylor Pendrith in the way of continued good play. The guy's playing really well. And maybe it started, like you say, last year at the Sony where he finished 10th. He's done well at our correlated courses. And again, fits the bill of having played the week prior, played well the week prior. You're right. He's more of a bomber mold, but, and a great short game. So, I mean, as you noted, a lethal combination. I just think he's a up and coming player. And he makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons this week. The price is fairly juicy. I got him at 35. So yeah, he's another guy that would probably surprise me if he's not hanging around in that top 10 neighborhood. And if you're hanging around in the top 10, you've got a chance to win.
And then again, Eckroat and Kitayama, more good contenders. Eckroat 15th last week, 17th at the RSM, and then the win at the Worldwide Technologies Championship. So he's in that zone we're talking about, winning twice last year. Kitayama, we haven't seen him for a while because he hasn't played since the Zozo in October, but he was really starting to come on. I mean, he disappeared for most of the season and he lost his game, but he seemed to get it back right at the end of the season with a 9th and a 5th to end 2024 for him. So we haven't seen him since. And he's also gotten better each time he's played here. So the only thing is the rust. That's it. Other than that, he's also a good play to keep an eye on. And then you have one of my picks. There's JT Poston sitting there at 35-1. He won 3 events ago, as we recall. So he's in that zone, winning the Shriners. He's also gotten better over the last several events since he's played here. 6th last year, which was his best finish at this event. So I think that's a good sign for Poston. He's also, coming in here with all 3 of his career wins have been on golf courses that are like around 72.5 and less. So it's kind of like in his zone, and it would make sense that if this would be a golf course that would suit him.
Yep, I totally agree with you. Lives at Sea Island, home of the RSM Classic. So he absolutely knows this coastal Bermuda type golf course, very familiar with this type of surroundings. And fits the bill that he played last week. I was on him last week at Kapalua. He too, like Benny On, never really was able to kick it in. And I just didn't know if the current form is good enough right now. And that was my thinking last week. It's like, hey, he just won out here in Las Vegas in October. Current form has to be decent. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if he showed up this week. I mean, he's got a tremendous short game. He gets a hot putter for 3 or 4 days. And absolutely, JT Poston. I think JT Poston's a player that can win just about anywhere. But this type of course, he fits that bill, that Kevin Kistner, Kevin Na, Russell Henley. He's that type of shorter knocker grinder that makes sense here. One thing, too, you mentioned Austin Eckroat, a winner of the Worldwide Technologies recently. And we've talked a lot about Mayakoba along the Riviera Maya just outside of Cancun, where they used to hold the Worldwide Technology. The last year for the PGA Tour at the Worldwide Technology at Mayakoba was 2022, which is a course that's really well connected here to the Sony. Don't confuse Eckroat with the WWT victory. That was at Los Cabos, El Diamante at Cardinal, the Tiger Woods course. The PGA Tour has switched their venue for that same title sponsor of the tournament, but different golf course. So just be careful there when you're looking for that connection between the WWT and the Sony. The last year at Mayakoba, where it is a correlated course, was 2022.
Okay, and then we've got some more picks here. Griffin and Hall are on. Griffin's on my side. Hall's on your side. Griffin is getting close to winning, and he's coming in on a nice little run. 4 straight top 25s, including an 8th a couple of starts ago. 2 appearances here. They were both fine. I like what he did. He's also putting really well. Bermuda's his best surface. He went from 114th in the world 3 years ago to 96th 2 years ago to 65th last year. So he keeps incrementally getting better. This may be a top 50 season for him if he can get a W. Meanwhile, Hall, watching, I forget what event it was that he won. That was just a crazy finish. That was the one that was where there was like 6 or 7 guys that played in the playoff, I believe, right, Brady? The Harry Hall win?
I think you might be right. It was the ISCO Championship, which is played in Kentucky. I think it's Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay.
And it was an alternate event. It was like the same week as, I can't remember if it's like the PGA Championship, but, one of the, when a signature event's going on and they play, an alternate field event, Harry Hall won that. And that was part of my handicap this week, a recent winner like Taylor Pendrith, like Maverick McNeely, like these guys that I'm on this week and you too, recent success, kicking down that door and getting a win with the big boys gives you that confidence. Harry Hall showed up at Kapalua last week and played great. I think he was top 10. I think he finished 8th.
Yep.
And he was a guy that really popped in my stats last week, but I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go with Harry Hall. And sure enough, he looked great, had a great week. I think he kind of makes more sense for this week. And one of the courses I mentioned that I believe is strongly correlated is Colonial Country Club. Well, Harry Hall a couple of years ago went all the way to the bitter end at Colonial. I think it was Emiliano Grillo that ended up winning that year. Yep. But that's where that was kind of the coming out party for Harry Hall, where we saw him compete at Colonial. So again, I think that shorter type of track makes a lot of sense for him. You mentioned he's a great putter. He makes a ton of birdies. Since getting that win at the ISCO Championship, he closed out the fall season with finishes of 9th, 13th, and 14th. So he finished up, October, November on a good run as well. He's a very good scrambler. He is excellent on the par 4s that measure 400 to 450 yards. And he is one of the top players in this field in hole proximity from 125 to 150. So there's stats that make sense. Again, the current form. And that's why he made my card. I was able to get him at 50 to 1.
Well, we have still a bunch of players right around here. I have Chris Kirk at 50 to 1, and I also have Mackenzie Hughes at 55 to 1. Meanwhile, I also wanted to bring up, you have Davis. His odds are at right here at 55 to 1. And Berger was someone I was actually considering because Berger, he really checks a lot of the boxes regarding the golf course trends. He's got the win at Charles Schwab. He's 3rd at RBC Heritage. He's coming off that really good showing at the RSM Classic, where it looked like he was going to get the win after kind of struggling after the injury and nothing was really happening. And then boom, it looked like he was going to get the win. Didn't happen. That went to McNeely. The only thing is I wonder about the putting on Bermuda, and that seems to be a little bit off right now. But then again, most of everything that was in Berger's game has been kind of off. But I think he's a solid play this week. But I went with Kirk and Hughes instead. And we talked about Kirk before. And if you take a look at Kirk, not only does he have I think he was, he has 2 runner-ups, 2014, 2021. In his last 4 trips to this event, he's got a combined 58 under par with a 3rd, a 2nd, and an 18th. He also has a 27th. So I like the fact that Kirk is coming in here, playing as well as he is there. He also has a win at Colonial. He won at the McGladrey. That's a 7,000 yard golf course. So
that's
I think
Sea Island. That's what they now call the RSM Classic. Yes. It used to be called. Yeah. So Chris Kirk makes a ton of sense here. And he's also a winner last year at the Century, right?
Yes.
I mean, those guys you're talking about, Chris Kirk. Who was the other guy that you went with that you just mentioned?
Well, I haven't started going over Hughes yet, and I also talked about Berger.
Right. Mackenzie Hughes, another guy that's done extremely well at the RSM Classic, a tremendous short game. No, I mean, I think the profile of the player that you've landed on this week is the Sony Open to a T. Daniel Berger, you mentioned the putting has maybe been a little off as of late, but traditionally a tremendous putter on Bermuda, his best surface, where he's done very well at the Phoenix Open. This guy went to Florida State. He's a Florida State Seminole. He grew up putting on Bermuda grass. And you mentioned the success at the RSM. Now, there's no doubt about it. He's also a 2-time winner at another correlated course I used this week, TPC Southwind in Memphis. Bermuda grass surfaces there. So all these guys make a bunch of sense. But the thing is, Greg, we can only pick a few of them. We can't land on them all, right?
Well, again, that's the reason why I think it's better to take some like a 2 or 3 or 4 of these players than to have to risk more money on, say, Hideki at 9 to 1.
Yep.
Because these guys are all capable of winning. It's not like it's a real long shot or anything like that. These are all capable. Now you have Cam Davis in your group, and Cam is coming off in 3 of his last 5 events. He's got a 13th last week at Century, 6th in Australia, 5th at the BMW. He does have 1 top 10 here, and he's made 5 straight cuts here. And Bermuda is also his best surface, and he has a couple of good showings at the RBC and also Charles Schwab.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at what he's done, he's finished 6th and 13th at TPC Southwind. He is 7th and 3rd at Harbor Town, as you reference. He's got a 7th at Colonial, the Charles Schwab. Over the last 24 rounds, he is 9th in this field for birdies or better gained, and he is number 1 on the long par 4s of 450 to 500 yards. And last week, he was a guy that I thought might flash at Kapalua last week, and I almost got to Cam Davis last week. I'm glad I ultimately ended up with Matsuyama, but I stayed away from Davis. And I was kind of patting myself on the back because he shot a 73 in round 1, which, you know, if you aren't in the 60s at the Century, when the wind's down, you're not catching up. And so his first round was awful. But then from there, he got hot. He had back-to-back 64s, and as you noted, ended up finishing 13th. So he really turned it on after a bad round. So I like maybe what he found midweek last week. And he's had success at the correlated courses. He's had success here at the Sony. So, you know, that where he got hot there for 3 of the 4 days at Kapalua, I'm hoping that carries over this week.
And again, that was when it wasn't windy. So
Yep, absolutely. And there's going to be more, and that's another great point. There's going to be more wind this week, as we noted, anywhere from 10 to 20 miles an hour. But Cam Davis, being from Australia, Australians are some of the best wind players in the world because it's always windy there. So I have faith in him. I have confidence in him in being able to handle a good breeze.
We also, again, in this grouping, I have Hughes, you have Tom Hogue, and Thomas Detry. With Hughes, you mentioned how good he is at RSM. First, second, 5th. I mean,
not too shabby.
No. Also 8th at Charles Schwab. And he did not play last week, so keep that in mind. But he's got a hot putter. Matter of fact, if you look at it, he has really done well on Bermuda. He's been actually above average all year in the last 12 months. Between 0 and 20 feet. So that's really working out for him. And he's red hot, 6th, 5th, 8th, 4th in his last 5 events. So those are 4 really good showings in his last 5 events. Now, he hasn't played since the Ned Bank in the first week of December, but that's not a real cold spell. It's only about 5 weeks. So that's not that bad. And I guess the last thing with Mackenzie Hughes is the kid's talented. It's just a matter of can he take that next step? And he's playing, I think, better than he's ever played. Now he's got to go out and start winning some of these events to back that up. You have Hoagie, again, Tom Hogue, who was 3rd in 2018, 8th last week, winner of Pebble. Matter of fact, he really plays well early in the year. And I was thinking of him as well. He won Pebble. He was 2nd at Amex, 3rd at Century. So this is like the time of year where Tom Hogue plays well. And Detry is interesting, of course. He'll be playing here for the first time. He's been close so many times in the past year or so on the PGA Tour, even though he's never won professionally on either tour, DP or PGA Tour. But keep this in mind. This is also important because he's an inconsistent player. So I was wondering, and I said, you know, he's inconsistent. I got to go do some research on him. And I did research, and Thomas Detry was 5th last week at the Century. He has not had back-to-back top 10s since week 44 and 45 in 2020. So that's the inconsistency. Now it's the beginning of the year. It's a new year. And if he's going to take that next step, it's about time he starts to become more consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it with Mackenzie Hughes. You know, he's won already on the PGA Tour. We talked about it at the RSM Classic, but I believe he is playing the best. I think he's playing better than he ever has in the last couple of seasons. Yep. And I think the same is true for Thomas Detry. this guy's really starting to come around. I saw him just like Taylor Pendrith. I saw Dietrich play very well at the Farmers Insurance Open at Torrey Pines. He showed up at Kapalua in a big way last week. I think being there in Hawaii an extra week or a week prior will help him this week. He's the fourth best putter in this field. Over the last 36 rounds, strokes gained putting on Bermuda grass, Thomas Dietrich is fourth in this field. And I just like the way he showed up at Kapalua last week. And that's the one thing that I had that's going against him that gives me a little bit of concern. You mentioned he's never played this event before, and we don't typically see debutantes win the Sony Open, but I think he's got a real good chance to make some noise. I think, like I said, you mentioned he hasn't had back-to-back top fives, in 4 or 5 years, but I think he's never played better in his career. I think Thomas Dietrich for the last year in 2024, he had 4 top 10 finishes. And what I saw last week at Kapalua, I think the guy's game is just getting to a point where he's going to win pretty soon. And who knows, maybe it'll be this week. Cam Davis, we already talked about. Tom Hoge, you mentioned a winner at Pebble Beach, smaller greens, coastal property, similar to what we have here at the Sony. He's done well at Colonial. He's had top 10s at the RSM. You mentioned a 3rd place here at Sony back in 2018. Also, we talk about Colonial Country Club and the Charles Schwab. Tom Hoge went to TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. So I'm sure he's played that course a lot right there. Colonial Country Club also in Fort Worth, Texas. So I think that helps, being familiar with that type of track could translate well this week here at YLA Country Club.
And the only other players that were on my list of long shots, I went back to the well with 2 of my long shots from last week, Eric Cole and also Nico Echeverria. And reason being, Cole 13th last year, and he's still putting really well. And this is the one thing that I've made mistakes on before. This is one of my lessons I've learned, and that is not every time, but sometimes when you take a player or 2, and then the next week you don't for whatever reason, and then they play well or play better, and sometimes even win. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do that all the time. You can't just take every player you took the week before. But sometimes for me, it's like if you like a player, not just because of how he matches up with that golf course or whatever, there's other reasons how he's playing. Well, one bad week or one off week shouldn't, mean that all of a sudden you no longer like him, or it's just, hey, he had a bad week. It's golf. I think if you like a player and he's done well over time and he has a bad week, chances are he could pick things up the very next week. So just keep that in mind, anybody out there. Again, I'm not saying 100% all the time, but if you like someone one week, don't think that the next week he may not be a pretty good option, especially at the odds. And that was the trick. I can get these guys at 70 and 80 to 1 again. I figured I might as well go ahead and do that. I was also thinking of Nick Taylor, because he's actually played pretty well here lately. I believe he's got back-to-back 7th place finishes here, I think. We know how good and hot he can be with the putter. I'm actually surprised he hasn't taken that next step, but I guess he's just an inconsistent player. But I will say this, if you ever see Nick Taylor on the top of the leaderboard or in the first page of the leaderboard on a weekend again, take him to win. Because whenever he's in contention, he just seems to get hot with that putter, and he's nailing everything all over the golf course. But anyway, those are my long shots. I know you don't have any official, deep long shots. So before you go, Brady, give us a couple of, really deep long shots you were considering.
Yeah, and I like all your selections there. I'll just go over what I do have. Maverick McNeely at 29 to 1, Taylor Pendrith at 35, Harry Hall at 50 to 1, Tom Hoge at 60 to 1, Cam Davis at 63 to 1, and then my longest shot, Thomas Dietrich at 80 to 1. Nick Taylor is actually a guy I looked at. You're landing on a lot of the guys that I definitely took a hard look at. We talked about Keegan Bradley. I looked at Mackenzie Hughes. I looked at Nick Taylor, who's had great success at this tournament before. I looked at Daniel Berger. Chris Kirk makes a lot of sense. Adam Svensson is a guy that I landed on at the RSM Classic a few years ago when he won it at 150 to 1.
Okay.
So he kind of always makes sense on this type of golf course as well. That's the thing about this field, Greg. It's not as loaded as last week at Kapalua as far as star power, but there are a lot of guys in this field that are very good. I mean, I think you can go 50 or 60 players deep this week on guys that could win this week. And maybe it's 75. There's a lot of really good, some of them are lesser known, but Taylor Pendrith, Thomas Dietrich, Daniel Berger, these guys are, tier B players, if you will. It's not Scheffler and Matsuyama and Morikawa and Justin Thomas. And It's not those household names that we all know, but it's the next level. And there's a lot of them here in this field this week.
Yeah. I mean, Novak, I know that you took him not too long ago.
Yeah.
He's somebody that is actually, he's had a hit or miss here. He does have a 12th place finish. Not too long ago, he was second at Bermuda. And Patrick Fishburne is a player that's kind of interesting. If you take a look at him again, we're talking about deep long shots because Fishburne has a nice little run going. And I don't know what you feel about his game, but he hasn't played here before. By the way, the last player to win here in his maiden appearance was Russell Henley, doing it all the way back in 2013. So it's been a while, like you said. But Fishburne's got 6 top 15s in his last 11 with 2 top 5s and an 8th at the RSM. Rico Hoey, that's another player that's really going through a nice run. I don't know whether or not he could win. I mean, I don't know what kind of a player he is overall as far as if he's got the game to necessarily be with the big boys in these types of events, but I think he's worth considering. He's got 9 top 30s in his last 13 with 4 top 10s, 2 top 5s, and a runner-up. Lee Hodges is coming off a 5th at the RSM, a 16th, and an 8th in his last 4 events. And he won the 3M Open back in 2023, missed the cut here in 2022. So those are just some notable long shots that I think were worth mentioning.
Yep, no doubt about it. Like I said, I think this field is really deep for potential winners. And Lee Hodges is another one I took a glance at as well.